passionate about building a sustainable future for the society, and a firm believer of harnessing the power of youth to create a better world, my next guest on Duologues is someone who has been part of building PwC's legacy in India. Please welcome Mr. Sanjeev Krishan, Chairperson of PwC in India, to this episode of Duologues. Sanjeev, thank you for agreeing to do this episode of Duologues with me. And before I begin the conversation, I must compliment and congratulate you for PwC celebrating 150 years of your presence in the country. So much has been already contributed, and I, on the other day when we were celebrating it together, heard you speak about the entire journey of 150 years. It's commendable. I still recall in 2018 when Panasonic celebrated its 100th year of founding. You know, we were founded in Japan in 1918. It was a milestone to celebrate and also to look back at how it has contributed for the society and how it has grown from a position where we started and what we are today. So to begin the conversation, if you can reflect upon the journey itself, how these 150 years have gone by, and then maybe subsequently we'll touch upon some of the aspects that what you are looking at in next decade or so.
So thank you, Manish, and thank you so much for having me. And yes, thank you so much for the 150 years. It's really been a very gratifying journey for us, having started that long back. Calcutta was incidentally our third oldest office.
Absolutely.
And we were also the third country, which effectively means that Calcutta was the third oldest office globally. Right? Which is where we came. And for 49 years, we were just there. We started many years back just doing audit work and, being liquidators in those days, etc. And, I think it's the reason that is gratifying is that we have grown with the growth of the nation, so to speak. In the earlier days, we used to do a lot of work with a lot of Indian clients in those days, Birla Jute, Martin Byrne, and so on and so forth, etc. We grew as they grew. We had independence. And then post that, we had a lot of our Indian partners joining the partnership, so to speak. We are an Indian partnership, as you know. And then, being able to contribute to India's progress, whether it is a broader privatization program that, right, the government of India has led. We are absolutely proud of the work that we have done on power sector reforms, for instance. Then thereafter, when, the Indian government actually wanted to come up with a proximity to customers, we were part of that journey as well. So in some ways, we've been part of the process that the government has led in terms of them trying to create enablement for their customers, which is us, the people. Also with corporate India, so to speak, and we've been again part of the journey, and it's very proud to be part of the journey and see the growth that they've had, whether it is focusing in the initial days and navigating the regulatory environment that we had. Then thereafter, post 1991, once the Indian economy opened and Indian companies were all of a sudden enabling them to compete with some of the global players and come off well, contributing to the whole technology revolution, if I may call it so, which India has experienced. And then today, when we look at our business today, how we are actually focusing on clients which want to create outcomes. Today, we are not talking about transformation anymore. We're talking about sustainable transformation, and I'm sure that's a buzzword that you also keep talking about. How can we be part of those journeys of our clients to not just create trust in their stakeholders, but also today create outcomes for them, which of course is, in some ways, both trust and outcomes are value accretive. Yeah. So be part of the value accretion journey. It's been a gratifying journey, and we just hope for an even more inspired future, should I say.
I would totally agree with you, and I can kind of very well relate with that also. And being an organization wherein the sustainability, something which was very central for us to be able to sustain the test of time over 100 years, is precisely what you just mentioned. And the basic business philosophy, which is the purpose of our existence at Panasonic, it essentially states that recognizing our responsibility as industrialists, we will devote ourselves for the progress and development of society and the well-being of its people. And it kind of goes on from here on, but it is kind of very similar. So, this reassures that if the purpose of existence of an organization is to service the society, and the stakeholders, then that becomes the very reason of its sustainability. On the other hand, while in the past I used to believe that change is the only constant, and in last few years, with so much of uncertainty and with so much of opportunity, what I've started to feel is that not only change is the constant, but the rate of change itself is changing. And in this circumstance, in last 150 years, or the time since we've been part of this industry or this society itself, we have observed that a lot has changed. The society, its expectations, the aspirations of people, technology, policies are changing rapidly, essentially getting fueled from the geopolitical shifts which are happening. So in some sense, the situation, while is full of opportunities, but in some sense has many complexities and challenges also. Keeping up pace with this kind of change and evolving as an organization over 150 years, and especially in the times which are going on, is not an easy task hand. So at PwC, how have you been managing, staying with the times?
So I think three things I would say. I think first thing is, and you use the word, and to us, we are a people-driven organization. We are a knowledge-based organization. I think it's really been our people over the years. Today it's very gratifying again to note that we are almost 21,000 people. And the fact that we managed to attract people over the years is something that, in some ways, enables us to contribute, whether it is to the society at large or indeed to our clients. Now, this requires us to continue to invest in them. We committed last year when we came up with our India new equation narrative for India that there has to be significant investments in, getting more people for the growth that we see in India, but also continuing to upskill them.
Right.
Because it is they who deliver the change that you as a client expect from
Absolutely.
us. Whether it is on any of the tax, regulatory, trust matters, or indeed on any of the technology matters. Today we are talking about AI, machine learning, and so on and so forth, etc. Yes, you'll get bright young kids from colleges, but how do you train them? How do you give them a horizontal mindset so that, of course, they come up as subject matter experts, but the horizontal mindset. We're talking about transformation and we're talking about business transformation. So how do we get them that horizontal mindset? And that requires a certain amount of upskilling. And of course, there's some of us, like me included, who did not train in technology, and we need to be upskilled to be able to embrace technology. So, for us, it needs to be at another basic level. So I think upskilling is one big thing. I think second one is really being able to make your choices, because you could aspire to do 20 things, but you need to be able to say that, okay, I'm going to be known in the market, or I wish to be famous for a few things.
Absolutely.
So over the years, I think we have trained our focus in some of the technology areas. We are very proud to actually have been a partner of choice for many of our, with many of our alliance partners who have been part of this journey with them. It could be on the, some of our ERP implementation partners. Today we're working with a bunch of cloud partners, etc. And, they have been part of the journey. So we were able to make some choices. And today we have, very strong analytics practice. We have a very strong, ERP implementation practice, etc. We have over the years built a very strong deals practice. So we have actually focused on where we want to actually be, what is it that we want to be famous for, and we have built capabilities on those. Making choices is very important to my mind, because
Absolutely.
you have only that much money to invest, whether you are a corporation or a firm like ours, and you use your capital judiciously. I think the third thing really has been to stay current and be able to build those lasting relationships. Just as I spoke about people, I think build those relationships with your clients. I think that has been the most important thing, because you can't be transactional. You can't live in India for 150 years being transactional, which means that you have to invest in your client.
Sanjeev, you spoke about the significance of making the choices, and maybe I'm shifting the conversation a bit. In your own professional life, I mean, there would be situations where you would have made choices, and certain situations would be like chances. So life is all about choices and chances. In your case, how did this particular career happen? I mean, was it a matter of choice or a chance? I mean, how did this happen?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, I did sciences in school, and then I did economics in college, and then I did accountancy for a living, if I may call it so. I really wanted to do economics because I really felt that my heart lay there. Honestly, I would have loved to be an economist in my life, but I grew up in a family of quote unquote munshis.
Right.
I just embraced what the family has been doing, and I braced myself for the CA, for being a qualified accountant, and so it is. So at times it is choices, at times it is the cumulative assessment that you make as a family and the guidance that you get. And I have no regrets. I think it worked
Right.
out quite well in the end.
Indeed.
God's been kind.
Indeed, indeed. So coming back, Sanjeev, there are so many opportunities. We can very well see them around us, plenty lot in our country, and in some sense, we are very lucky also. And as I said, that our approach towards opportunities sometimes can require maneuvering through complexities, and there are again plenty of challenges as well. And if you look at one of those which exists is the significant necessity for shift in the supply chains globally. And we understand that in the first instance, the shifts in the geopolitics might be fueling this opportunity. And we, in some sense, I've seen being part of FICCI's Electronics Manufacturing Committee. I chair that committee at FICCI. I've also seen that the country has been taking the leadership of the country. People like you have been enabling and catalyzing that conversation, and industry is also very proactively taking part in that, because we understand that if we don't seize this opportunity now, it might be a little late in the time to come. So some of the reflections, because from my point of view, backward integration is the necessity of the hour, because in a larger sense, say the industry has been already assembling a lot of goods which are getting consumed in the country. So backward integration, let the component manufacturing to happen in the country is the necessity. A lot of policy interventions, including the PLI, has already happened. But simultaneously, while our country itself might look at unlocking this huge potential of demand which may exist in our country, and that may still take some time, I'll come to that later, the necessity to also look at the world, to be a situation for us to export the goods from here in the time to come.
Yeah.
Some of the reflections on that?
I mean, we need to reduce our import dependence, no question about it. And fuel and electronic components are two key components there. We also need to make ourselves more self-reliant, which doesn't mean that we don't care about foreign capital, but we need to make ourselves self-reliant. The whole focus on Atmanirbharta is there. And I think more importantly, the opportunity in some ways, maybe we are lucky because the opportunity today is coming our way,
Yes.
so as to speak, because of what's happening geopolitically. Right. I have to say that some of these things cannot be automatic, will not be automatic, because when you try and shift anything, it takes a while to happen.
Right.
But we need to make a start, and we have made a start. For instance, if you look at, since you spoke about the PLI scheme, I mean, if you look at pharmaceuticals, I think initially, we import a lot of chemicals still from outside of India. And it's one of the reasons that our pharmaceutical industry has been so successful. But with the PLI scheme now for inputs to the pharmaceutical industry, can we shift that balance? I think that's something which has been enabled by the government, and that's needs a lot of applause for that. Likewise, today we are thinking about what is it that we can do to my mind, when you talk about supply chain, I completely get it, but I suppose it's going to be a mixture. Certain amount of localization of supply chains will happen. I don't think that the interdependencies of the world will completely go away ever. They can never go away.
Absolutely.
But certain amount of localization will happen. So in the times of crisis, for instance, when they happen, any country is not bereft of resources to be able to serve its people.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. And hence this focus on localization, certain amount of localization of supply chains is very, very critical. And I think whether it's the PLI scheme, whether it is the broader Atmanirbharta focus that the government of the day has, I think are key elements. And they are being enabled. We have been talking about India and India's place in the world. We all know, that India's labor cost is possibly better than,
Yes.
even China for that matter.
Yeah.
But where we have suffered is really infrastructure and logistics. And I think that's where the government of the day has been focusing on. We ourselves have had some role to play in some of the initiatives that have been launched. Look at, for instance, the broad focus on logistics, etc. the gains that we make on the labor side, we lose on the logistics side. You know, people have different impressions that whether it is 400, 500 bips or whether it is more. Should we just be using the road infrastructure from a logistics standpoint? What can, you know, some of the others do? We have, of course, the broader focus on the blue economy right now, where we're talking about inland waterways and others, and that focus. So I think with some of those coming, I have no doubt in my mind that certain amount of localizations of supply chains will happen.
Right.
That will create the enablement for India to be self-sufficient and Atmanirbhar. And then over a period of time, it will enable India in some ways to be more competitive on some of the areas where India could be an exporter to the world.
Interesting. So Sanjeev, I think you narrated it quite aptly. So when you physically look at the development which is happening in the infrastructure space, you can very clearly notice that it is happening at a very fast pace, including the construction of road at an unprecedented speed. You need a lot of resources to do that. And if you look at the budget specifically for last 2 to 3 years, it has been a very methodical approach, a very structured approach. Large capex investments in every budget have been noticed. You need resources, you need money to do that. And you know, I quite often in many conversations mention that it is a walk, something like a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And if you look at GST, the collections, as the Revenue Secretary also recently mentioned, that you know it has been consistent at 1.5 lakh crores every month. So it's increasing by the months, by the quarters, but still it seems not sufficient. On the other hand, the expectations of industry to make products more affordable, make services more affordable. In our case, for example, the expectation for a while has been that can you consider air conditioners to no longer remain a luxury product? It is indeed becoming a necessity in some sense. So can we look at lowering the rate of GST and make it more affordable and hence create more demand in the country, and it adds to economies of scale, hence competitive cost of manufacturing, and it triggers a positive cycle.
Sure.
So everybody understands. I mean, it's simple to understand. It's simple mathematics. So it's not easy for the people in the position of responsibility to take those complex decisions.
Right.
Any reflections on that?
So as you said, I think it's not been easy, but I think three good things. One, of course, on the fiscal situation, since you mentioned it, I do believe that it was very evident that the government wants to enhance capital spending, and they have been doing that. I suppose the capital spending will continue because, you know, everything that we spoke about, infrastructure, logistics, I think the focus of the government is clearly there. And the resource augmentation, you know, whether it is through divestment programs, etc., or whether it is through some other privatization programs, etc., is one area. Of course, you know, GST has been a huge enabler over the last at least couple of years. I think this is something, as the economy continues to formalize, I do believe that the GST revenues will continue to see more robust growth. Yes, as industry, we would wish for things, for rates to rationalize further. I know that initially, I think the combination, for instance, for ACs and others, for luxury ACs, as we used to call it was around 25%, the combination. And today, it is possibly 28%.
That's
so I'm
right.
sure it's a bit of a dampener. But then the question is that what happens on the IGST side in terms of imports, right? So I think that is a fine balance that needs to be drawn, unfortunately. I mean, look at this year's budgetary estimates. I mean, every budgetary estimate is ahead of what was sought in January. And I think this is something which it sort of tells me that we will continue to be able to find resources. We haven't actually done a lot of divestment, privatizations, etc. So there isn't a lot of that revenue which is coming in. And let's be candid, if the economy continues to grow, as the economy continues to grow, I mean, even if you're going to grow at 7% plus as being anticipated, that should in some ways also result in, I know that people talk about the inflation effect and all that, and I acknowledge that. But I think as the economy continues to grow, the tax revenues are bound to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah, so quite often we do not see the hidden benefits of a certain environment also. And say, for example, in case of air conditioners, over a period of time, they have become far more energy efficient. And in some sense, we have not only done a catch up with the European norms or the top standards which existed globally, but we have already exceeded them. So in some sense, we are consuming the energy in much more efficient manner. And in a direct sense, it is reducing the total cost of ownership. So the burden coming as an outcome of a lot of interventions on the policy side and the technology which is coming in is creating lesser cost, of the ownership. And while products are now starting to consume lesser energy, their impact on the environment. On the other hand, if you look at corporates embracing, say, the governance models based on ESG based, models, we have sustainability sitting central to the consideration of a lot of organizations to create their own sustainability in the time to come and also be an integral part of the ecosystem we exist. What are your reflections? Because I have heard you also speak quite adequately on this subject, and PwC is also spearheading a lot of interventions to create an awareness amongst the corporates on ESG based models. So some reflections on that.
So I think that has been the talk of the town for the longest time. I think now, actually, few of the conversations recently, it has been less of a conversation topic because everybody is embracing it. Not because people are not thinking about it, but because a lot of people have embraced it already. Yeah. Maybe three elements I would say. I think first and foremost, because these are the questions that come up, that okay, what is the cost, right? That okay, if I adopt environmental friendly measures, then what is the impact that it will have on my bottom line right now? I think I see increasing adoption because people are starting to believe, corporations are starting to believe that yes, there may be an immediate impact because you embrace climate friendly ways of doing business,
right,
or sustainable ways of doing business over a long period of time. And we all look at, the present value of cash flows, etc. That over a period of time, it is going to make your revenues and your profitability more sustainable. It is also about how you are perceived. It is about how you are perceived by, let's say, capital providers. I can say that it is also about how you're perceived by your employees.
Absolutely.
I mean, there have been studies which have showed that for organizations which have been more climate friendly, etc., the attrition levels have been almost 2% lower.
True.
So I think it is about how you attract capital, how you attract talent also, not just the fiscal part of it. The other part that, I do want to talk a little bit about is, because we talk about ESG in a broader sense. See, governance has been a focus area for us forever.
Yeah.
Environment, I think, is getting a focus. There is a lot of work which continues to get done, and people say that, okay, how do I make my capital allocation decisions? Because, let's say climate change today, see, it's not only when two games and Australia get washed out because of rain that you think about climate change. You need to think about it in your capital allocation decisions. Right. How is climate change going to impact the India topography? In 25 years, we're talking about India at 2047. You don't make capital allocation decisions for today or 5 years. You make it for a long period of time. So I think you need to be able to make that reflection as you make that capital allocation decision. And I think that's something that, it's about, yes, it is about being water friendly, plastic friendly, and so on and so forth, but it is also about capital allocation decisions. And I do believe that some more work needs to be done on the S element.
Absolutely.
If we really want to look at ESG in a comprehensive way.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, before we dive into your life itself, maybe my last question on this particular part. There is so much of entrepreneurship which is getting fueled in our country, and not only into the bigger cities but into coming in from smaller towns also. And the necessity for us to integrate small and medium enterprises in the bigger value chain, in the ecosystem, is also very, very important. In some sense, in last couple of decades, while large industries with the purpose of assembling the products has already happened, but integration of small and medium enterprises, access to technology for them has not happened in a large way. And in some sense, we have also not invested. And parallelly, we see so much of innovation already happening, and more specifically in the digital space. Any reflections on that, or any advice to people who are wanting to create newer solutions for the society, or wanting to get integrated into larger industries in the country?
So I would say that, it's all pervasive at this point in time. And, the reason that I say it is, and why I feel that there would be more encouragement for this, is that if you look at the citizen enablement model that the government has been running, and, we have been fortunate to be part of some of them.
Right.
But today, when you look at any kind of e-enablement services, including the Aadhaar, right? I mean, we are calling it revolutionary. It has, today you can open a bank account sitting at your home. You don't even need to go anywhere outside. We have been just looking at the chaos at T3, and people are talking about the Digi Yatra program, which is again something that we were proudly associated with. Now, when you look at some of these use cases, I don't think you need greater motivation. If that is what is enabling to solve problems of us, the people, at scale, that would give me the motivation. If I'm an entrepreneur and I'm thinking that, okay, how do I create a solution, a digital solution, which can, maybe I'm looking at value creation for myself or my capital providers or whatever. It could be whatever my motivation could be. I think there are numerous opportunities that are on offer, whether it is in our education space, the healthcare space. We spoke about some of the industrial areas, etc. I think the word digital, I think, has broader connotations.
Absolutely.
We talk about transformation, but when we talk about digital transformation, it means different things to different people. For a retailer, when it was suffering from who did not have, let's say, even a website. And today, if you ask him that, it's a lifesaver for him.
True.
So I think, digital has actually been a huge enabler over the years. And I think, I don't think when we see some of these things, let's say a retailer which actually has sales 40%. I know of a retailer which has 40% of its sales through digital channels, while it was just a, on-premise retailer, as I was mentioning some of the other things like the DigiYatra, I think there is so much happening which is enabled only by technology, by digital means, and that to me I would challenge any entrepreneur to say that, okay, you need to look at the world around you, and there are so many problems that you can potentially solve by embracing technology and digital means.
Absolutely. So Sanjeev, if you look at last 3 years since we had this global crisis of the life for a very long period of time continued to be unpredictable, and it was anyway unprecedented. In some sense, the societies and people understood the fear of unknown, and this can be from multiple perspectives, not necessarily from the perspective which I mentioned. So how do you at a personal level, consider the fear of unknown as a challenge, and how do you kind of prepare for it? And you also spoke about the fact that a lot of us started our careers when the analog era was about to get over and digital convergence was starting to happen. And work, the way it happens, has significantly changed, and the necessity for people at every age and experience is to continue to upskill and sort of reskill themselves. And I think that is one way to counter the situations, including the fear of unknown. So any reflections on this one?
So I think, to me, I think the agility of mind and being able to move with the times and quickly at that are the two big things which one needs to do. See, I mean, we couldn't have anticipated that it would hit us.
Yeah.
And, as I was mentioning, how business models have changed for, let's say, the retailer example that I was giving. But if I had taken too long,
True.
to change my thinking that I need to have a digital end to my business, it would have not helped me. So I think the ability to do things at scale and the ability to do things fast in response to whatever is happening. You cannot, to my mind, you cannot anticipate everything that might happen. Yes, we might actually work with a futurist to say what is the world going to look like tomorrow. Today we are talking about shifts because of age, technology, geopolitics. There's so much disruption all around us. So you can work with, as I said, futurists or technology experts, and ask what the worldwide view might be in 2 years, 3 years time. People might say that the world is so fractured that I do not even have one view of the world. You and I might have a different view of the world. So I think we need to, build scenario, do scenario planning, and say that, okay, what is going to be my response in scenario 1, 2, and 3, but then be ready for a fourth scenario. And then if the fourth scenario hits you, respond to it quickly and with agility, and then take your entire team with you, because as leaders, it is not just important for them to think about it themselves, they need to take their entire team with them. They need to possibly think, a large part of the team needs to embrace that change, because one person thinking of that change and embracing that change is not enough. So that communication and that ability to get them to see the same shift that you are seeing is also going to be very important.
So Sanjeev, it is easy to imagine that your work life would be something like living in a suitcase, and adequate travels and significant amount of engagements every day would be keeping you extremely busy. Finding out time to upskill and reskill anyway is one of the challenges. But how does your me time look like, and how do you kind of rejuvenate yourselves on a periodic basis? Because sometimes, consistent engagements and the usual life can be very challenging.
Yeah, so I must say that's been a bit hard over the last 1.5 years or so, but I still I mean, these days Delhi is too cold, but I love my morning walks.
Okay.
And that's the time when you get to reflect on the day and the week ahead of you. I also use the time to listen to some podcasts and stuff, which I think are of relevance, and that helps me from in the upskilling journey. And I used to actually do a digital detox some time back.
How do you do that?
So I would just switch off my gadgets for 8 hours on a Sunday or whatever, and so still receive phones from family and friends, but otherwise you. But I must say I haven't done it for a while, so possibly need to go back and do that a little bit more. Intent used to be to do like a quick weekend getaway every 3 months. Would have loved it to be 3 weeks, but 3 months. Just to re-energize yourself and get back to the routine, if I may.
Sanjeev, I know that you've been consistently engaging with youth from variety of manners, including engaging with them at the campuses. The necessity to integrate the potential of youth in the structures which exist and hierarchies still exist, while a lot of us are trying our best to let that integration happen. And in some sense, I also believe that experience or age may not be necessarily directly proportional to capability. So any reflections or your learnings while you've been consistently engaging with the youth, any kind of...
To me, I think there is so much to learn from the young generation. And I have to tell you that whenever I'm at a campus, it just blows my mind to see how people are responding and how aware they are of everything. Yeah. And the questions that come up, they are such composite questions, etc. They're so well read, etc. Not just subject matter, but also more broadly as to what the implications of many of those things are. I think one of the things that I feel is that we as organizations need to do better, because at times we box people. These people who already seem, when I go to campuses, seem to have a very horizontal mindset, that we say that, okay, you be a tax person, or you be an audit person, or you be a whatever, consulting person. I think we need to do better and create a little bit more fungibility, something that we as an organization decided to do some time back, and enable them to have different experiences, because that's when the best of them can be evident to us a lot more. We were talking about technology. I think some of the questions that get asked, there's a technology element to almost everything that they are thinking of. The third one, which I feel is very, very critical, is that when we are talking about enabling them, etc. I think this generation doesn't care too much for what you mentioned, the broader hierarchy in the system, etc. They want to speak out their mind, and I think one should let them speak their mind, because there is, largely, I've figured in my conversations that they wish to learn from the past. They want to live in the present, but they want to be challenging themselves to think about the future. And yes, at times the future seems, for many of us in our generation, might have seemed 25 years, and for many of them the future may seem to be 5 months, in some cases 3 years, not beyond that. But that's good. That impatience, I think we need to get that impatience and that excitement, the exuberance that you have. I think we need to give it a little bit of direction. That is what organizations like yours and ours can do, and that is what people at your and my age could do. Absolutely. To make sure that makes a maximum use for us as a society and for us as a nation.
Sanjeev, before we conclude the conversation, and I must say that it was extremely insightful for me. This is one question which I ask every guest of mine on this platform. While people like us have come a long way into our life and to our professional lives, accumulated learnings, faced challenges, and again created learnings out of them. What is that higher purpose which kind of wakes you up every morning and infuses a sense of energy in you to do what you do? So what is that which you are looking at in the next phase of your life, and what is that higher purpose which drives the energy in you?
So I would say two things. I mean, my immediate focus obviously is we are, as I said, 21,000 people. And coming through last year, which was a pretty difficult year for people, both mentally and physically, the sense of responsibility to the people that I have in the organization and to the broader PwC family, which is, let's say, if 4 multiplied by 21,000, 84,000 people, right? So that's the sense of responsibility that you wake up with, that you are responsible for that many people. And you need to, in whatever you do, whatever you act, howsoever you act, you should bear in mind that you are, the future of 84,000 people is, not at stake, but yeah, I mean, you're
It's your
representing them.
responsibility.
It's my responsibility. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one. I think the second one really is create that enablement and that impact because of what you say. Because, frankly, we are in a position where what we say can get, through the various platforms that are deciphered by people, they might take 20 meanings out of it. So whatever you put out, you need to be a lot more responsible. And I think that's something which I'm very, very conscious of. To the question about the higher purpose, I think that from that standpoint, the one thing that we, and that's something that we have done, we have managed to do as a family always over the years, and now being in this position is to, howsoever you can make that smallest impact, and you don't want to talk about it, etc., to society at large, and to anybody who is been part of your ecosystem. It could be the people who have given their life working with you, for you. Yeah. It could be simply what you can do for people outside. And I think that gives you a lot of satisfaction. There are multiple platforms, at least 2 platforms that I'm a part of. And whenever time permits, I actually, spend time with them. And that gives you a lot of satisfaction. I'll just give you another example, and that's something which, so through our PwC Foundation, sometime back I had the opportunity to speak to kids, they're not very well to do, but they were thinking about their career. And, looking at their aspiration and just talking to them and providing them some amount of direction, if I sort of manage to do so in that 1 hour, gives you a lot of satisfaction. I think God's been kind. We have the ability, we have today the prowess to actually give back to the society, and I think that's something which we all need to do, and I possibly will want to do a little more of that as time goes by.
Yeah, that's inspirational. Thank you so much for saying that. Which is the very purpose I also do this conversation in my own small way. If at all there can be a tiny contribution, of what I have received otherwise from the society, from the people around, in my own small way, to give it to people, insights and inspiration from people like you who have achieved something in your lives and are also wanting to give it back to the society in the time to come. So that's fantastic to hear, Sanjeev. Thank you very much for saying that. The conversation has been extremely insightful for me, enriching in many ways. So I must say thank you to you. I also wish you all the best for all the endeavors, including the one which you mentioned towards the end of the conversation. I also wish everybody best at PwC, and my compliments and congratulations once again for the celebration which goes on for 150 years of existence in the country. May the firm and you yourselves at individual level continue to do good for the society and the people around and the corporates and the clients. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Manish. Really appreciate this. Thank you so much for having me over.